Welcome, everybody, back to Tide Pod on the YouTube and podcast home of TideIllustrated.com. We are back. Jack Knowlton, myself, and Tony Tsoukalas, our great Bama football expert, back on to do a little recap. We're going to talk Alabama at SEC Media Days and just recap everything that went on there. But before that, Tony, we need to talk about some news that you here at Tide Illustrated broke recently in the last couple of days, got picked up nationally. And that is, of course, something that I think Alabama fans were expecting sooner rather than later at some point to happen. Bryant-Denny got a little bit of a renovation in name only, I guess, so to speak. Alabama is going to dedicate the field at Bryant-Denny to the great Nick Saban. It's going to be called Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I will let you take this because you kind of broke this news for everybody here. Finding out that it is going to be called Saban Field, and obviously it was approved by the UA Board of Trustees. But, talk about sharing that news and what do you think? I think everyone was kind of expecting this to happen at some point, but, already in the first year post-Saban, his mark is still going to be left on the field at Bryant-Denny.
Yeah, this is something that I guess we learned about maybe a month ago at Tide Illustrated. I think I told you, I told Kelly Quinlan, our boss, but Alabama wanted it to be kept under wraps until pretty much right before they were ready to announce it. So they did, kudos to Alabama for giving us the heads up or the green light when it was ready to go. And it was more out of respect for Nick Saban that we kind of held it and kind of let it go. But it was cool. It was cool to get that news out, and I think it's a great honor. I don't know how much people were surprised by it when you really think about it. Nick, you were always going to honor Nick Saban in some regard that way. I think people were actually more hoping that it would be like Bryant-Saban Stadium or Saban-Bryant Stadium. It's just so hard to take a name off of a stadium, and I know Denny has the chimes, and I think that's what a lot of people have said. But, when you take Denny off the stadium and you make it Saban Bryant Stadium, or as Nick Kelly from AL.com pointed out, Bryant Saban Stadium would be BS Stadium. And so maybe you'd make it Saban Bryant Stadium. But regardless, if you do that, I think when does it stop? What happens in 20 years if DeBoer's won 4 or 5 titles? Do you put him on the stadium too? You can't have 3 names on the stadium. So you're not going to kick out Saban or Bryant, So I guess that's a good problem to have, but I don't think it's much of a surprise. I think it's good. I like that they're honoring it on the second home game, because I think doing it against Western Kentucky would take away from DeBoer's first game at Alabama. So I think that it's a nice touch to do that the second week. Gives you a reason to go to that South Florida game. Although we've also had, we're recording this on a Tuesday, South Florida's coach came out and basically had some words about Alabama as well. You can find that on the site. But no, I think overall this is going to be a good thing. I'm excited to see Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium come week 2.
Yeah, definitely. And so the thing that popped into my head was, so obviously he's got the field named after him. He already had a statue. Do you put some sort of, I thought of, my mind went to in the American Airlines Center where the Dallas Mavericks play, after Dirk Nowitzki retired, they put a silhouette of his fadeaway shot on the court. Do you put some sort of Saban? I was trying to think how you did that.
I would wonder, there's got to be some kind of I bet you that's what we're going to see in week 2, is there might be some kind of, maybe it's written in script or something.
Yeah.
I would expect it to be subtle. I don't think it's going to be some huge thing. I guess if you wanted to do some kind of caricature or something like that, you'd have the straw hat, but I don't know how that would translate to a grass spray paint logo. That's probably somebody else's expertise other than mine, but I could see maybe that like a straw hat kind of, leaning onto Saban Field. And then I haven't seen anything. It's just kind of my artistic mind here.
Speculation. Yeah. I don't think you don't superimpose his face right on midfield.
Yeah. That's probably not going to happen. Yeah. But I think that's cool. It'll be a touch. I know some people have talked about getting it into the video game too. I wonder if they do that on the latest update of the college football video game. I wonder if they'll have Saban Field.
Yeah, that would definitely be a good touch. It'll be interesting to see, like you said, week 2, what they kind of do, how they choose to go about it. But yeah, like Tony said, we had that breaking news that Alabama is it's gonna be called Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium here, to start off the DeBoer era. Exciting stuff. We'll see how they honor it. I guess let's segue on that note, Tony. We're going to go back. We're going to talk Nick Saban as well, because of course he was a big presence at SEC Media Days. But I think, let's segue on to the new era, the new coach, Kalen DeBoer. For the first time in, a decade plus, a new coach stepped up to the podium at SEC Media Days. Let's start there. What generally just did you think of Coach DeBoer, and what was it like to see? I know you've covered this team for a while. Of course, I think pretty much every beat writer who's here currently has only covered this team under Saban. What was it like to see another coach step up to the podium at SC Media Days, and how generally do you think Kalen DeBoer did?
I think he did fine. I mean, obviously, to get the first question out of the way too. I mean, obviously, it's a bit different to not see Nick Saban lead Alabama out behind the mic. I mean, you normally look for that. He almost sets the tone of SEC Media Days. He's one of the key attractions. So to not have him his 20 minutes or whatever, normally it came with some kind of a saying, or was it "don't waste a failure," or last year you had the cakes in the oven, and I can't think off the top of my head, but there's a few more of them. It's just like the little mantra that he sets for the season. It's usually when he kind of debuts that. With DeBoer, I don't think you're going to get those moments, so I don't think I was surprised. I think he handled things pretty well, but I don't think you're going to get, cake in the oven talk. That's not his style. I don't think he's going to come up with those, I don't even want to call them zingers, but those kind of quotes, bulletin quotes that, the team's going to rally behind. He might have those, but I think he's kind of just the coach that's going to say how it is, he's just going to want to talk about his team. There's going to be no frills in terms of how he handles the media. You ask him a question, he answers the question, call it boring or whatever. I think, it's not going to be quite the showstopper that Nick Saban was, but I think he's handled it fine. I think he answered all the questions he had to answer. Honestly, I think there was such a focus on it being his first time, and a lot of he kind of lucked out. I guess you could say lucked out because he got to answer a lot of the same questions over again. There's a lot of people that asked him, why did you take over Alabama? It's like he's answered that a million times. I don't know why that was asked, but he didn't really have to talk too much about Parker Brailsford or Caden Proctor or some of the other issues he's dealing with, some stuff back at Washington. None of that was brought up, so that's a win for him. I have full confidence that he would have answered all those questions and he was prepared for him, but maybe that's something that we'll see in preseason camp. But I expect Kalen DeBoer to kind of always be what he was, and it's one of those things too. He's so accessible that I think you lose some of the questions. I think, with Saban, people were holding on to questions and you only got to talk to him maybe 6 times throughout the off season if you counted them all up on. And it wasn't even local reporters. It'd be that's you only got a few media appearances from him. And with DeBoer, it seems like he's on a podcast. He's probably on a podcast right now while we're talking. I don't know what it is.
He should come on this podcast.
Yeah, probably. You know what? I think if we asked him, he might. There's a 50-50 shot he would do it. The cool thing I heard about Kalen DeBoer is he actually got there, early so that he could talk to as many radio stations, and he really wanted to be a part of this. And yeah, I think, the mindset he takes behind this is he's confident in his program, and he's confident, and he wants to get the word out there. And he's confident that I think where Nick Saban distrusted the media and was always guarded towards I don't want to get, this out here because I don't know how it's going to affect my team. I think Kalen's just man, I love this team. I want to get all these stories out there. I want to get, I want people to keep on talking and doing the message. And I think it's going to require Kalen DeBoer to have a really good communication with his staff to make sure that they're all on the same page. Because that was the difference between him and Saban is Saban, it was all coming from one mouth. And so he could control it himself. I think DeBoer, the challenge he will have for doing it this way, which I don't think is too hard, but I think the challenge he'll have is he'll need to make sure that all his voices are speaking in the same direction, that, his assistants are on point, his players are on point, and the message is the message. And but from media days, when you looked at the way that not only he talked, but the players were well spoken, they stayed on message. I think it went pretty well for Alabama.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think you're making some good points about the confidence and kind of the, how you kind of unify that message. And I think DeBoer, not just in his media appearances, but generally has done a good job of he always talks about, I feel like, setting that balance of respecting the traditions, but also instituting what he wants to institute and the things that he knows has helped him succeed in the past. And that goes, into the media stuff too, and how he kind of executes those things, like you said.
I think with DeBoer, one of the things that I've noticed is he's taken, he hasn't just done, this is what we're doing because this is what Alabama always does. I think he looks at it and he thinks, okay, why can't the media talk to my coaches? You know what I'm saying? Why? Because we've always done it. And I think he thinks, no, I think I want my coaches to get experience talking to the media. I want to get more voices getting our message out there. So I'm not going to follow with that, preceding that precedent. Sorry. And it's the same thing with, maybe freshmen. It's like, Nick Saban never did that. With DeBoer, I could see us talking to some freshmen, because who knows how long freshmen are going to stay in the program. You know what I'm saying? You got people bouncing around. You got NIL ruling everything. So they're going to be talking, maybe away from the program. So I think when you look at that, he kind of looks at the pluses and minuses from that, and being able to highlight players that deserve to be highlighted. And so when you look at, the way he's handling things, it's like, what makes sense? Not just like, what have we always done? What makes sense? And so I think you're going to see some changes. I don't think he's going to tear up the playbook on how Alabama does things, but I do think that some things need to be kind of refreshed to fit into today's model with, the way things are run in both from a media standpoint and from an NIL and, transfer portal standpoint. And so I think you're going to see him do a lot more of those kind of things that are more new age, because I think he's going to think that they make sense.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, and I think we're already kind of starting to see that. Let's dive into, kind of what he did start to address, obviously, with this current team. And I think one thing a lot of people were looking toward was, of course, Nick Saban on SEC Now. DeBoer, made his appearance, on that, and the two kind of got to, talk face to face, and Nick Saban got to ask questions like any other media member about, of course, the program he used to run. Super interesting dynamic. But, I know we wrote about a couple of things. There was, they talked about Jalen Milroe and how he developed as a passer. I know Ryan Williams was, of course, brought up, and Nick Saban had some statements there. Let's start with Milroe. I know you wrote about this. Jalen Milroe and how he's kind of developed has been a point of conversation since the start of last season. What kind of sparked you, and what did you write about with that, with what Milroe, or with what Saban was kind of telling DeBoer and what they talked about with Jalen Milroe?
Yeah, there's a lot of optimism towards or regarding Jalen Milroe in terms of both from Nick Saban and from and from Kalen DeBoer. And I think that just the general thought is, if he continues to progress, he has all the tools to succeed. And so what you got to do is just kind of like, I think with DeBoer, and he said this a few times now, is just kind of getting him more comfortable with what he's seeing. A lot of that's going to be pre-snap. A lot of that's just being confident in the playbook. And if he's able to do that, I think the success will come. The intermediate passes, if you know the playbook really well, what you're seeing from the defense before the snap, you'll start seeing those intermediate passes, those opportunities rather, open up for you a lot more. Instead of maybe panicking and rolling out and then finding someone deep. Those are all things that highlight Jalen's athletic ability. He's always going to be able to hit that deep ball. He's going to be able to run. He's going to be able to make plays happen. Extend some plays with his feet, and maybe that will open up the deep ball as well. But I think when you look at he's playing a good defense, maybe in the red zone, or where he needs to really kind of pick apart a defense where they can kind of like crowd things. I think his ability to see what's happening and have more comfort of getting different looks is going to help him find the open man. And I think DeBoer's offense is going to create a lot of open men. So it's for Jalen, it's just a matter of kind of like getting that and make the more second nature that becomes. There's nothing about Jalen's. He's a smart kid. He's athletic. He's a good leader. He's going to be able to do everything you need him to do as long as he just continues to work hard at it and keep on making these improvements. So I think he's got all the tools. I think Nick Saban and Kalen DeBoer think he has all the tools. That's what it sounded like. They were very confident in him. But it's going to take a lot of that. I think this preseason is going to be really big for Jalen and just continuing to master the playbook. One of the things, when I talked with Kalen DeBoer is, you look at these last 2 years with Michael Penix. Well, you also had, Penix was already familiar with the system from their time in Indiana. So it's tough to learn a system and to truly master a system, in one off season. So there might be some growing pains. There might be, but I think that's another thing too, that you're going to look for Jalen Milroe is just how does he overcome that? How does he maybe face adversity and bounce back a little bit from it?
Yeah, I think the last thing you brought up, that was a quote that stuck out to me from Saban was, he gave all the praise to Jalen Milroe for his athletic ability and being a dual threat. And, I think straight up said, you can't play certain defenses against him because he'll make you miss. But his whole thing is controlling the emotionality of all of that and letting, keeping your head level. And then that helps kind of subsequently with executing a more complex offense, it seems like.
I don't think there's any, I don't think it's necessarily a hot take to say that Jalen's because of that athletic ability, his ceiling is higher than back in Ewers, because you look at like they can't do what he can do with his legs. So if Jalen can kind of get more comfortable in the pocket, avoid sacks, know when to get rid of the ball, know when to hit those like what Kalen DeBoer said, those high percentage passes. Know when to get rid of those. I think that defenses are going to have to then respect that. And then, if defenses have to respect that, even in a similar way to the way how they respect it for Ewers and Beck, I think that, Jalen's just going to tear them apart with their legs. And then it's just a pick your poison deal. And I think that's where, if that can all fall into place, I think that's where you're starting to see those Heisman potentials with Jalen. Now, we're a ways away from that. That still needs to develop. That he's not the passer that Carson Beck is. He's not the passer that Quinn Ewers is. I think if you were being put him on a lie detector, I think he probably would tell you that. But he can develop into that, and I think that that's a scary thing for the rest of the SEC, because I think that Jalen Milroe could be the most dangerous player in college football if it all comes together.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there with that and how we see it. We'll hopefully see it develop, as the season starts to get underway. And like you said, the fall camp for him is going to be a real measuring stick with how long it's going to take into the season to get to that place that obviously Saban and DeBoer see him reaching. I want to bring up a thing about possibly one of Milroe's weapons next season. I think a lot of Alabama fans are hoping that this guy emerges, right away as a true freshman in Ryan Williams. And, this is something we also wrote about on Tide Illustrated. And I kind of wanted to get your take on this with what Nick Saban said about Ryan Williams. His quote, he talked about it basically being, he mentioned it to DeBoer and he gave praise to Ryan Williams for essentially staying at Alabama, or at least hearing Alabama back out after he decommitted. Obviously, that whole saga kind of seen as DeBoer's first recruiting win as the new coach, was re-landing Ryan Williams. And he gave a lot of praise not only to DeBoer for doing that, but to Williams for having that patience. And to me, it almost felt like a little bit of a glimpse into, his maybe somewhat annoyance with the ease of players kind of leaving and choosing to leave when situations change and stuff like that. I was just curious your take on that quote. And then obviously with Ryan Williams, DeBoer had a lot of great quotes about him with both his athletic ability, talked about his maturity seems to be emerging for a 17-year-old freshman. What were your thoughts on what he was saying about Williams and what Saban kind of said about him choosing to stay at Bama?
Yeah, I think even, I think maturity is key, because I think you look at what Nick Saban said and Ryan Williams' ability, even as a 17-year-old, basically, a high school junior, to not just abandon ship after he had already, he looked at Alabama, decided that that's where he wanted to go. And then to not just throw all that away because the media is talking, or that not even the media, but the general consensus around Alabama is that it's a sinking ship. Because there was a few weeks there that it seemed that Alabama was going to be in some big trouble. And, to be fair, Ryan Williams did cause some of that when he decommitted. But after he decommitted, I think he handled the situation really, really intelligently. He weighed his options. He took his visits. He let Alabama's staff develop and then gave Alabama a real shot again. And then determined that that's where he wanted to be, and I don't think you should blame him either for decommitting and looking around, and that's natural. But I think it showed some maturity to both do that and to realize, like, okay, I'm not going to let someone else determine what I want from a program. So I think you've seen that in terms of his maturity. You talked to, I think it was Malachi Moore, that was just, really praising him for the maturity he showed. And, kind of one of those things where he looked and he's like, it's hard to believe that he's just a junior, or he should be entering his senior year of high school. So I think that, obviously we know what he can do in the field. When you look at, those kind of players, the difference between those kind of players getting onto the field early, a lot of times it is that maturity. I think, Kalen DeBoer might have talked about that too. It's just like you get those players that like have the talent but aren't quite ready there, mentally. I think you look back to, not to like run anybody through the mud, but you look at a guy like Ajay Hall, a few years back, came into Alabama. We saw what he could do in A-Day. He's a guy that had all the athletic ability in the world, didn't have it put together, wasn't ready for the college, grind yet. And I think he struggled to get on the field. And obviously he never really grew from that. And you saw his career kind of be washed away, unfortunately, despite his talent. And I think, from what I'm hearing about Ryan Williams, he's a guy that's going to come in, be locked in, know what he has to do to make a play. Look, I don't expect Ryan Williams to be a starter from day one. I think he's going to be heavily involved in the offense. But when you talk about, if they come out of a 3-receiver set, I'm expecting that to be Jeremy Bernard, Kendrick Law, and Kobe Prentice, So I don't think that's going to bother Ryan Williams. I don't think he's going to say like, oh, I'm Ryan Williams, I'm the talk around campus. How am I not, in the starting lineup? I think he's going to just take that and know that he has a role in the team and make the most of his opportunities. But that's the big test around him. And there's a lot of pressure. We haven't talked about a freshman, like this maybe since, Julio Jones, just in terms of what he's going to mean to the DeBoer era, kind of almost like this was DeBoer's first real win. And if Ryan Williams, can replicate the success that Julio Jones had, I think he's going to be one of those guys you look at as the cornerstones towards, that built the DeBoer era. And obviously, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of his decision making. He has a chance to be a legend. I think if Ryan Williams had gone to, let's just say like an Ohio State or LSU or something like that, I'm not sure he's a legend. I mean, he'd be good, he'd make it to the league. I think that he's going to probably make it to the league anywhere, I think, being a chance to have that, that person that built the DeBoer era, I think that's pretty special.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of really good points. I'm curious off that with, kind of Saban saying that and making that kind of a point, talking about players leaving, and he said straight up that he thought some guys who chose to depart would live to regret that decision. And obviously DeBoer's sitting right there. He's always going to be nice publicly to the guy taking over for him. But what did you make of that? Maybe, did you read between the lines at all there with that statement?
I think a lot of Alabama fans want to think that that's directed towards Caleb Downs leaving to Ohio State. Who knows? I mean, I think that, obviously the story behind Caleb Downs leaving to Ohio State was Downs came for Saban. He didn't come for Alabama. I think that's, and I think that's a lot of kids. I think maybe what Saban was trying to say is that, Alabama is a special place. It wasn't just me, and that, it's still going to be a special place when I leave, and you're going to regret, leaving it, I don't know if it was a direct shot at only Caleb Downs. I doubt it. There's a lot of players that left that, you look at a Trey Amos, right? I think he's a player that, I think, obviously the Downs, transfer hurt, but I think the second one, is definitely that really hurt Alabama. And I think that's a guy that would have definitely been a starter for Alabama. You know, he's going to be a starter at Ole Miss too, and Ole Miss is going to be a great team. But, you know, once again, I think probably Saban's talking to some of those guys that are like, hey, man, you could have been a starter at Alabama. And like, that's nothing to turn your nose at. And so I don't know. Every player has their own decision. You know, I don't know. I'm not even really. I brought up those two kids, Downs and Amos. They both went to what I'd call playoff teams, and they're both going to have roles on them. So you really can't blame their decision. You look at, you know, Amari Niblack and Isaiah Bond, they probably went to a playoff team too. So you looked at all the, you know, Malik Benson went to Florida State. They'll probably have a chance. You know, so it's, you know, it's just there's a lot of people that went to big time programs, and just kind of like something you're going to have to expect in today's game. And whether or not they regret it, you know, I think that's part of the process too. You know, I think there will be some kids that, I think Saban's right. There will be some kids that regret it. There'll be some kids that don't. There'll be some kids that probably, I mean, you know, regret coming to Alabama. You know, it doesn't always work out. Just like you can't, there's a two-sided sword here. You know, you know, you can't just say that the kids that are leaving Alabama are going to regret it. There might be a kid that thought he was going to get an opportunity at Alabama. It turns out didn't win his position battle, and then didn't get the, you know, the experience he wanted. But that's just part of the transition of college sports. And that's it happens in the NFL too. You know, there's failed off-season moves. I think you're just going to have that now. It's something we're going to have to kind of like expect. And when, you know, from a roster building, you almost have to build your roster around, hey, not all these transfers are going to work.
Yeah. I like that you brought it all the way back full circle a little bit and mentioned the NFL, because it feels, you know, more and more like that. That's what college football has started to become like. It is truly, people use the word free agency pretty openly now. And you know, that's how these coaches at elite programs are treating it. It will be interesting. The two names I thought of too, of course, were Jameer Grimsley and Julian Sayin, who are in the 2024 class and transferred themselves. So we'll see how stuff works out for them. But back to things on this team, Tony, and the guys who are staying and are part of that, the first year of the DeBoer era. Some other headlines that we wrote about on Tide Illustrated from SEC Media Days. Let's start on the defensive side of the ball. And, you know, you mentioned Caleb Downs leaving, obviously Kool-Aid McKinstry leaving, Terrion Arnold leaving. You know, the secondary has been looked at as a place of need. Alabama brought in some transfers, but also have a guy in Malachi Moore as a veteran coming in, going to be a pretty crucial part of that secondary. I know you wrote about that. He was obviously at SEC Media Days. What did he have to say? And what'd you kind of think of, you know, or what do you think of him, you know, kind of how important is he going to be here next season to help out this secondary?
I want to give our intern, Dean Harrell, a shout out. He is actually the one that wrote
sorry, Dean.
Malachi Moore story. So shout out to Dean for all the help he's given us over the last year. Don't want to steal that.
We love Dean.
Credit. Oh, yeah, we love Dean. You know, I think that when you look at you know, Malachi Moore, you know, spoke about the secondary, and of course he's going to say great things about it. But on the same hand, when you're looking at the biggest hole or the biggest red flag or area of concern, it's got to be the secondary, especially that cornerback position where Alabama's going to have two transfer starter. You would assume Deshaun Jones is going to start the Wake Forest transfer, but if he doesn't, you're going to have a true freshman probably in Xavier Brown. So you're going to have, you know, him, and then on the other side you're probably going to have Damani Jackson, the USC transfer. Outside of, you know, those, you know, Jones and Jackson, I think, you know, there's not much experience. It's just a bunch of freshmen. Now they're a bunch of 5-star freshmen, are blue chip freshmen, but there's not a lot, and there's not even a lot of numbers in terms of cornerbacks either. So that's a position that I think, you know, Saban, when he was, you know, criticizing Alabama to a certain extent, or, you know, I think we'll get to this later, but, you know, Nick Saban didn't pick Alabama to win the SEC, and that made a lot of headlines. I think when you look at the reason behind that, it comes down to that cornerback position. And that's a position that obviously means a lot to Nick Saban. That was his baby at Alabama. So I think he looks at it and he said he understands the importance of that spot and kind of knows that, you know, outside of the starters, things are pretty tough. You know, if Damani Jackson goes down in week 1 with a season-ending injury, Alabama could be in some serious trouble, you know? And you're counting on a guy in Damani Jackson who, you know, didn't have just some standout season at USC last year. I think he showed some promise, and I'm expecting a real breakout year from him this year at Alabama. I think there's been a lot of positive talk coming from Alabama about him, but he's not necessarily what you would call like a sure thing at the moment. So even he, and he's your best cornerback, even he has this question mark. So when you look at that position group, it's just that is the area of concern. That is the thing that we'll be talking about probably for the next month until we really see it come together on the field and you get a little bit more of a taste of what they have there.
Yeah. So how important then does Malachi Moore become? Obviously, in that safety room and adding that experience. I know I believe it was Tyler Booker who talked about, he's on a championship team, with Alabama and has been there for a long time, knows the Saban culture, knows the Alabama standard and all that. How important does that make him then?
There's a lot of new faces, right? So he's a fifth year, basically, if you don't want to call him a starter, he's been a fifth year different. All 5 seasons, he's been a difference maker. He's been part of the rotation there in the secondary. So he's a guy that, knows the standard, can preach that to other players. He's also just got a ton of experience. So you talk about the fresh faces that are coming in here. He's going to be playing in the back part of the secondary. He's been, pretty much played that star position, which I was now calling a Husky. I think this year he's going to play back at that, rover position, that strong safety position. But being at the back of the defense, I think he's going to be able to call more things out. I think he's going to be able to provide some guidance on the field. And then, like I said, off the field, he's that leading voice. I think he's probably, when you look at the leaders of Alabama, I think the 3 people they brought to SEC Media Days, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Booker, and Malachi Moore, are kind of like the 3 that you would circle, first. But when you look at that, I think, inside the locker room, I bet you Malachi Moore stands out a little bit more. He just seems to really he's not necessarily the media darling that Tyler Booker or Jalen Milroe is, but I think he resonates a lot with the players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. He had that whole, if they're not wearing crimson, F them, I think he kind of rallies the troops really well. And I think he's going to do that in the secondary. And one thing he's going to have to do, not only just provide experience, make sure people are lined up right. It's kind of like he did, when in that story, talk some confidence, make these people, make his teammates, they're going to hear all off season and, over the next month about how this is the area of concern on the defense. I think as a leader on this team, one of the things he can do is talk some confidence into his people, have them playing with a chip on his shoulder and remind them that you're at Alabama for a reason. And, we're going to prove some people wrong. I think that's probably the message that's going to come from him.
Yeah, I think very well said. And I think you also make a good point of all 3, kind of emerging as leaders and being kind of the vital part. That was obviously a storyline that sort of came back into the light. Of course, Alabama fans, I think, knew for a while how those 3 kind of banded together in the 48 hours after Nick Saban retired to keep their teammates around and to, calm everybody's heads and figure out where they were going to go from here. So yeah, I think he'll be a vital part of things, both on the field and, in the locker room, like you said. I want to jump on the other side of the ball, Tony, and let's do a fun one now. We've talked about some serious topics. I'm going to steal your lead here from your story on this man. We're going to the wide receiver room, or back to the wide receiver room, I guess, not Ryan Williams talk this time, but Kendrick Law, made some headlines with something Kalen DeBoer said, and you brought up the new EA college football video game. There was a clip of Kendrick Law, zooming to the house in a jet sweep. And then DeBoer went on to say that he has hit 23 miles an hour in workouts and is able to bench 450 pounds. My question to you, Tony, isn't a question. I'm just going to say that's insane and let you talk about it.
Yeah, I think that, Kendrick Law is one of the most underrated players on the team. He's a guy that can do just about everything. He's a little bit, I think sometimes his ability to do everything, almost like people get lost in that and they forget how good he is at every single aspect. He's a guy that you can put in the slot. He can be shifty, that you could even put him as a running back. But as shifty as he is, he's strong, and he can bench, what would you say, 400? It's in the story, but 450. Yeah, 450 pounds. I mean, here's a guy that I think coming out of, he was listed as an athlete coming out of high school, and he could have played on the defensive side of the ball. Kendrick Law in a different world could be lining up at the Husky position for Alabama this year. He's just that talented, that fast. He can just do a lot of things. I remember I was talking with Kalen DeBoer, and I didn't have my recorder on during the time, but he was talking about just like how much acceleration that Kendrick Law has and how much of a problem he's going to be. And I think you kind of pay attention. I think Kalen DeBoer wants to kind of put some hints out there that like, hey, you should be talking a little bit more about Kendrick Law, because I think he's going to be a huge part of this offense. I think Jeremy Bernard are going to be two really big receivers for Alabama. And then you're going to have other guys like Ryan Williams and Kobe Prentice who can provide that speed as well. But I think when you look at it, Kendrick Law is going to be a guy that they can do just so much with. I think people, he's not, what is he, like 6 foot 200 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think people look at that and the tendency is you want your X receiver, or, the common notion is you want that guy to be like 6'3", 6'4", and that's not always the case. I think Kendrick Law has enough strength to fight off, press coverage. If at the X position, I think he's got the speed to test the field downfield at that spot. He can block out on the perimeter. So I think he's a great X receiver. I think he will be your X receiver. I think Jeremy Bernard will be your Z receiver. And then I kind of think that Kobe Prentice will kind of work the slot. And those would be your front three. And then obviously you're going to, sub in packages that have Ryan Williams. And that's not to say that, Kendrick Law can never be in the slot or Jeremy Bernard can never be in the slot, but I think that's kind of the way it's working. And I just think you're going to see a lot from Kendrick Law. I wouldn't be surprised even if at the end of this, you're seeing Kendrick Law have to make a draft decision. I'm not going to say that he's going to be like a top of the line first round guy, but I mean, if things hit right and you look at the way this offense works, I could see him being an early second kind of guy or late first. One of those guys that that you look at in terms of like it makes sense to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I'm glad the EA game makers got one right at least. That seems like the college football game's been well respected. I feel like EA gets a lot of flack for misrepresenting how players' abilities are, but it seems like Kendrick Law's was pretty accurate with his speed and his size. I think you make a good point about the room.
I mean, to put it into like Washington terms, or like he could be like maybe like the Jalen Polk. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like a guy like Jalen Polk went early second to the Patriots. Yeah. I think he can be that kind of player where he can line up, be kind of a possession guy. But also, have all the strength and the things to really impress NFL teams. So I'm expecting a lot from him. There's a lot of guys, though, I think on this receiving core that you could say that about, Mm-hmm. But I think that you don't necessarily have a go-to guy right now, but you have, when you look at it, I think you probably got 4 guys that could end up being the go-to guy. Because I think you got to include Kobe Prentice, and then Ryan Williams just has all that talent. And then there's other people that I think that are going to emerge that are going to do more than maybe what, people think they are. I think Cole Adams out of the slot is a guy that nobody really pays attention to, but we had him as the number 40 guy in our top 40 that we unveiled this week, in terms of most important guys, because I think that he can be a nice little possession guy for Alabama, and he can also do some stuff on special teams. So there's a lot of people that, there's not that certified star in Alabama's receiving core like we're used to, but there's a lot of people that could really step up and go back to like what I said about Jalen Milroe in the offense, and DeBoer will create some open receivers. It's just a matter of Jalen Milroe finding those guys. I think that this is the perfect example of that. Is there's so many guys that are capable, it's impossible to cover them all. And I think that if you can get Jalen clicking on the right, mindset and the right, just, like he's so commonly said, playing point guard and just finding that guy, I think you're going to see a lot of, short passes to open players that can make plays in open space. And Kendrick Law could definitely do that.
Yeah, I think you make a really great point about how it can be kind of be anyone, but it seems like Kendrick Law's gotten a lot of hype. I appreciate your DK Metcalf shout out in this article that you wrote with. He had the fastest touchdown in the NFL last season.
Yeah, you're a Seattle fan, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I always appreciate some DK Metcalf. Some DK
I didn't
Metcalf.
even do the Jalen Polk. I'm a Patriots fan. I didn't even do the
There you go.
comparison. And
Got to plug both our NFL teams. But yeah, we'll see if Kendrick Law. I mean, yeah, I think that should get Alabama fans excited for what he can offer. And I guess if you have the new college football game, I don't know if you play Ultimate Team. Seems like you needs to be a guy on your rosters. There you go.
I was one of the things that I got to do. We had Kelly Quinlan over there in Dallas, and I got to go behind the scenes with Alabama and play that video game. And a lot of the people were saying that that Kendrick Law and Kobe Prentice as well are just insane in that game, just because the speed that they have.
Yeah.
Throw them the ball. So it'll be fun, And obviously Jalen Milroe is just untouchable. And again, I got to play I was waiting on was Rock Montgomery to finish his video game so I could talk with him. And so there was an open controller, and there's some people that I saw. I played like a half while I
jumped on.
Yeah, and they had me play as Ohio State, and so I was playing Alabama. So I had Jalen Milroe wrapped up with two guys, and he somehow spun out of it and ran for 15 yards, and I was like, this is stupid. I can't.
Yeah.
I had him down for a 10-yard loss and just nothing.
They say video game speed for a reason, just because it works it's overpowered in the video games. Yeah, there you go. So we'll see what happens with Kendrick Law. Before we talk some Nick Saban, I want to ask you about this just generally. We had a couple of articles about the freshman. I know you wrote one about Amari Jefferson, and he kind of got some interest. Obviously, you get a lot of beat writers and different people asking different things. I think there was just one person there asked players about Amari Jefferson, but he was talked about. Tyler Booker name dropped a couple of guys, including Ryan Williams. He shouted out Williams Sanders as a guy in the offensive line room who's been really great this spring. And then two of the guys actually in the secondary too, and Zabian Brown and Jalen Mbakwe, as players who, he said in particular about Williams and Mbakwe, he watched him at the state championship and said, I'm glad those guys are on our team. So just thoughts on the freshmen in general. I mean, obviously we've touched on Williams ad nauseum, and even you hit on the secondary as well. There's some real talent there, but it could be interesting. It seems like some of these guys are maybe in a position to, have an impact. I like what Tyler Booker said, where, he said the locker room can tell when a freshman is going to get on the field right away. And it seems like Alabama maybe has a couple of those guys.
Yeah. And it's tough to write some of these guys off, if you look at Amari Jefferson, you look at, I mentioned four guys that I feel like could be, really good receivers. And then I mentioned, I guess, a fifth too, with Cole Adams. So breaking into that bunch after not even participating in spring camp seems like a stretch, but then you look at him and he's like the Tennessee player of the year. Let me pull up the stats from when I was, what he did. It's 74 receptions for 1,400 yards and 20 touchdowns. Amari Jefferson's a serious prospect too. It's just a matter of, depth is a good thing to have. I think a lot of these people, they're going to have to learn, but learning behind talent is always beneficial. So you're going to have a lot of these guys that are going to come in. William Sanders, right, is a guy that's probably going to play an interior offensive line spot. So he'll get to learn behind Booker and behind Jaden Roberts, two guys that I expect to be in the NFL next year. So, I think that's pretty solid. You look at it, that's pretty much that across the board. You know what I'm saying? Where you look at some of these young guys that maybe have to wait their turn. I think Alabama has set themselves up really well. I know you asked about freshmen, but one of the things I liked what Alabama did was you look at that safety position where you have Malachi Moore and you have Keon Sabb. I expect both those guys to maybe, obviously Malachi's out of eligibility, so he'll be gone. But then Keon Sabb could be a guy that could leave as well. But they'll have King Mack from Penn State and Cameron Howard from Charlotte. Those are two safeties they brought in that are going to be depth pieces this year, but could also be starters the next year. I think that they did a really good job of kind of keeping the wheel turning a little bit. You can't just always get lost in this year. And I think with a lot of these freshmen, it's the key will be them staying patient, but I think you've got a lot of talent. And so when Alabama does have these mass, departures, whether it be through the draft, transfer portal, the stuff you're going to have every year, if you have enough of these really talented freshmen, enough of them are going to stay and they're going to have those opportunities. And I think that's essential. I think it's so easy to get caught up in, okay, what are you going to do for this year? And that's why you can't just hammer the portal. You have to get guys and develop guys and make sure that you have that depth. And another thing too is, I mean, I don't know if receiver is the right point to point it out, but it is a long season. It is if you make the playoffs, it can go up all the way to 16 games.
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, that's basically an NFL regular season. There's going to be injuries, I think that's probably what a lot of people are afraid of the cornerbacks. But, having some of these young freshmen like a Xavier Brown, like a Xavier Mincy, maybe they don't start right away, but who's to say that, Deshaun Jones or Damani Jackson don't go down at some point, and you need a freshman to step up there. You want, as many people ready as you can. And I think that you're naive if you think Alabama's first team offense and defense are just going to remain totally healthy throughout what's going to be an extended season, hopefully, I guess, for Alabama. I think that, you're going to need some of these people that maybe, they're not starters, or maybe they're not even difference makers early in the season, that you're going to need them to be able to be difference makers later in the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make that goes back to what Tyler Booker said, where it's like you recognize those guys that are putting in the work to do that and understanding their role and understanding what that kind of takes to be willing to be a depth piece, but always be, like you said, ready for when your name is inevitably called. So I think it'll be interesting to see with across the board where kind of freshmen see playing time, where they might come in and who might emerge as a difference maker. We all try to predict it, right? I think that's how it always goes, and there's always something unexpected. Speaking of predictions, I think we got to touch on what Nick Saban said. We're gonna also talk about what Alabama, or what the media rather, predicted Alabama to finish, and their the first teamers and the all SEC team, stuff like that. But let's go into Nick Saban's prediction. Tony, what'd you think of him giving? I forget the exact term he called it later, but he picked Texas and Georgia to play each other in the SEC championship, did not pick Alabama. I know he later said something about he never wanted to be picked himself, so he wasn't trying to give them, that. There was something with reverse rat poison, I think.
No, you're new to the rat poison was always what Nick Saban would say for when the media was talking too well about the team. And so there was just rat poison to his players because it got them overconfident. And then at one point, you can call it reverse rat poison, or at one point, the media was doubting Nick Saban, and he called that rat poison, but he called it like yummy rat poison or something. You can look it up. And so I guess that's the reverse rat poison, in terms of maybe fueling the team and getting them, motivated. So it's all, we've heard every type of. He's
still playing mind games.
Yeah, I think a lot of Alabama fans think that he did that on purpose. I don't know. I think if you're picking, I don't think it's too much of a hot take to pick Georgia and Texas. I think that's what he did, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he even picked the champion. I think that's just what he picked.
Yeah, so he just picked the matchup.
I think if Georgia beats Alabama at Alabama, I think that's probably they're pretty much in line. And Georgia's got a really tough schedule though, so I don't know. And so does Alabama. Texas seems like they have an easier schedule than the two of them. So I think picking Texas as one of those teams would be smart. And then I think you probably go Texas and then some version of Georgia, Alabama, or Ole Miss. That's how I would do it. But whether it's him playing mind games or it definitely shows that he's not just going to be totally like an Alabama cheerleader. And that's nothing new, because I think you can talk to Alabama fans and they'll tell you all about Greg McElroy, how he never talks well about Alabama. So, it is what it is. I think more often than not, you're going to hear some positive stuff from Nick Saban regarding Alabama. But personally, I think he was probably right to pick the two teams he picked.
Yeah. And we'll do a show closer to when the season starts, and we'll do our preseason picks and make a graphic for all that, so we're stuck and it comes back to haunt us later when it's inevitably wrong. But sure. So I won't ask you for your own pick. But yeah, I think it's interesting, and I love the way the players responded too. I guess that's the only other thing I'll throw in. I like that Tyler Booker. My favorite quote I think of SEC Media Days from any team was him saying, well, he always told me, don't let someone in your mom's basement get you down. I'm not going to let someone who plays golf all day get me down. So
Tyler Booker is going to have like a career. Like, he is just really good in front of camera. You know what I'm saying? He's a smart guy. He's a charming guy.
$1 million smile.
Yeah. And one of the nicest guys. I mean, you got to still remember that they're just kids, and so a lot of times, they're going to be shy or they're not going to. Tyler Booker is one of the few, or probably a handful of people on the team that if he saw you in public, just as a reporter, would come up and shake your hand or something like that, or give you a hug, or he's just a nice guy that kind of recognizes everyone's role and treats everyone with respect. And not to say that like that's bad that like other players don't do that, but I think it just shows his maturity, and just his personality, and that he really gets it. You know what I'm saying? Like I think he really gets his influence he can have through the team and through saying these things, and how he can kind of change the narrative on some things. And I think he's just a really sharp guy. I wouldn't be surprised. I think he's going to have a long playing career, because I think you got that blend of power and athleticism is going to play well both this season at Alabama, and then he's going to play really. He's probably your best shot at having a first round pick at the moment, him or Milroe. But I think he'll have a long career in the NFL. But if he wants to, and join, follow Nick Saban and be a commentator, I think that's definitely in the cards if that's something that he wants to do, because he's so good in front of camera.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I haven't watched him or interacted with him in the media nearly as much as you have, and I can already tell that. So I think that
we used to give out a media good guy award.
Oh, really?
Sure. I think it might have done. I can't remember if we've done it or not. It kind of like COVID. It's one of those things, like one of those COVID casualties where it's like, actually. So I think maybe sometimes we like pick one between us, but then like I'm not sure if we give it out. Anyways, if we're still giving it out as a beat, I think that Tyler Booker is probably your preseason favorite. Like like
the odds makers favorite,
odds-on favorite to win it. I mean, there's a couple guys that could probably do well, but I think if you look at just the personality and the stories he brings, he's pretty cool. He's going to create plenty of stories.
No doubt. And you mentioned, that he's probably going to have a long on-field career. He was one of the 16 guys for Alabama that got put on an all-SEC team by the media. Let's touch on that quick just to finish things off. I'll run through them, real quick, and then you can give your take on if you thought anyone was left off or on the wrong team, what have you. First team did include Tyler Booker, Deontay Lawson, Malachi Moore, James Burnip, shout-out punters, and Nealon Hibbett. Second team, Caden Proctor, Parker Brailsford, Tim Smith, and Graham Nicholson. Third team, Jalen Milroe, Justice Haynes, Jaden Roberts, Tim Keenan, Jahad Campbell, Damani Jackson, and Keon Sabb. I thought interesting too, adding both the transfers there on the third team. We'll finish off with where Alabama is picked to finish as a team. But what do you think of was there any surprise names there in that group of 16 with where they were?
You have the Lou Groza Award winner on the second team. I don't know what more does Graham Nicholson have to do to get first team honors. He's already, was the best kicker. If you look at his stats next to the Texas kid's stats, was it Bert Auburn? I think is his name.
Yeah.
Alabama done in by an Auburn kicker again, right?
I think Bert Auburn, didn't he have a commercial with Will Reichard? I feel like I remember seeing that somewhere. I think they were both in an ad together for an NIL thing, which feels maybe. A little bit ironic.
He's a great kicker too. I'm not trying to take any of his shine away, But that's a tough blow for Nicholson. I think it's kind of cool that I think James Burnip is a guy that doesn't get enough like publicity, and I think he's really made strides. I mean, look, last year was his third season playing American football. He's just an Australian rules guy. Came in here, he's gotten better every single year, and now he's voted the best punter in the conference. So those two are big. I had Jeremy Bernard on my, I voted for Kelly because we didn't go, but Kelly gave me his votes. That was my like hot take of the persons that like probably no one else had on their first team. I put Jeremy Bernard. One of the people that I didn't have on my team that got like honors that I guess I didn't give him when I was Tim Smith, the defensive tackle for Alabama. He got second team honors. That's that's a good shot. He's a guy that is kind of underperformed in his time. He came to Alabama as a top 50 recruit, hasn't really provided the pass rushing threat that I think a lot of people have thought. I think the thought is this is his fifth season that he's going to do so this year. We'll have to see. I don't know if it was just me or when I was voting though, Jack, I didn't see Ole Miss's Princely. I can't say his name, but O'Malayan or
Oh
whatever. Like,
yeah, yep.
yeah, I didn't see him on the ballot, and so like, I wasn't like
Someone was trying to
I was
freeze him out.
kind of like in a rush, so like I didn't like. I also didn't see like a way to write him in, but then I saw his name like show up on like so he made like third team. I think he's a first teamer. I didn't vote for him. I'm gonna go ahead and like call my own stuff out. I didn't vote for him because I just like did not see his name on the ballot, and I remember being upset, and I wasn't gonna like. It was one of those things where I was like, this is not that important to be upset about, so I'm just gonna like move on. There's plenty of good picks, right? But yeah, that's one thing to circle. I think he got totally snubbed, and I think it's probably because like I don't know if it was when I was doing the ballot he wasn't on there, but like to me he's one of the best defensive linemen in the SEC, and what did they give him, like third team?
I believe so.
That's crazy.
Too low.
He's definitely a first teamer.
I'm glad you kind of. I was going to ask you maybe anyone else in the SEC you thought was in a weird spot. So there you go, Princely from Ole Miss maybe should have been a little bit higher.
Princely,
yeah, Princely U. It's DJU. That was the guy I always used to do that for was it was Noah Igbananahi from Auburn. I used to just call him Noah I. That was it.
Yeah, we
got
how
to say his name.
Nico I for Tennessee too.
Yeah,
I'm not one to talk. My last name starts with a T and an S, but but yeah, on the same hand, because so many people get my name wrong that I don't like to get it wrong myself.
Yeah,
I don't get other names wrong, so
you'd rather not butcher it. Very fair. All right, we'll finish things off with picks or with media picks. So Tony, I guess I'll ask, where did you pick Alabama to finish? They finished third by the media poll overall, had 12 points to win the conference, were sat behind Georgia and Texas. Did you feel that was the right spot? Where did you have them?
Yeah, I have them at third. I have them behind Georgia and Texas. I think Nick Saban has a point. I wouldn't be shocked if Alabama gets it, but I think that when you look at it, I think that going into it, you look at the rosters and, maybe just the people that they have returning, especially, the two quarterbacks. I think those are the two most established quarterbacks in the league. So you put all that together, I think that they're narrowly ahead. But I think I think Texas, I like Texas's path. I'd be kind of shocked if Texas didn't make the championship game. But then like between Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, you could even get it as far as like an LSU or a Tennessee. There's a lot of teams that could really push for that other spot. It's going to be, it's not divided by East and West either. So it's just the top two teams. I think it's going to be tough. And I think you're going to see a lot of SEC teams make the playoff, so even if you don't make it, I think there's going to be, I think probably at one point I'll like do my predicted playoff and make that a Tony's Take column or something like that. I'm not ready to do that yet. I haven't really thought about it, but I think that you'll see whenever I do that, there'll be a lot of SEC teams in there.
Yeah, I think that's a good, important note to caveat all that with. The SEC is going to have a lot of playoff representation, and where the final seeding is, does matter in terms of what seed you get in the playoff, but it is a little bit interesting because it doesn't overall matter as much if you make the SEC championship game. That won't make or break your chances of making the playoff. Obviously, you want to win all the trophies you can, but I think you're right. I think there's like a solid 8 teams, I think, in the SEC that I'm a fan of could challenge for postseason. I think that's where I stand.
Your alma mater, Missouri, I left them off the list as well. They're definitely a team that could punch for it.
I would throw them in there. Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma and Tennessee are going to be super interesting. Obviously they have young quarterbacks, but they're super talented.
Nobody in this podcast wants to hear it, and I don't think that they're going to be an SEC contender. But there's a world where if Peyton Thorne can kind of develop, and that's a huge if. We talk about Jalen Milroe being an if. Peyton Thorne's that's a huge if.
That's an
he'll have a ton of talent around him. There's a chance that Auburn could really ruin some things for some people. I don't think Auburn has the team that is good enough to compete for an SEC title, and I actually wouldn't be surprised if they underperform just because, like you said, there's a lot of I'm not even going to go as bold as Auburn could be I know a lot of people are picking them 8-4. Auburn's 6-6, and I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah.
But I also wouldn't be shocked if they were an 8-4 or a 9-3. You know, just because I think that if things go totally right for Auburn, you know, that's another team to watch. And boy, would that make things interesting, you know, come the last game of the season.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right with them playing spoiler. That feels like they feel definitely like a team.
Don't they? I think they start off with like 5 straight home games too. So I mean, like
could have a
you
good
get
start.
an upset there, a home upset, you know, like, and somehow if you start 5-0, I mean, like Auburn's also one of like from you know, and this is not an Auburn podcast, so people tuning out right now, we'll get off of it. But no, they're one of those teams that like when things go right for them, they capitalize. So if they're a team that they go 5-0, I mean, shoot, you know, like they could be a problem. So, but that's, you know, there's a lot of teams like that, you know, Tennessee, Ole Miss, like you said, Oklahoma, like a lot of those teams can kind of like really push this year.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, in conclusion, I think, Tony, if you were disappointed at all in any of your picks or lack of picks, you at least weren't one of the 3 people that picked either Vanderbilt or South Carolina to win the SEC. So
yeah, so I guess like that's kind of like you know, I don't know if I was gonna say it. I can't say it, but it's kind of like a bathroom joke. You know, it's like, oh man, that was funny the first time. Like when we were a kid. Now it's kind of like, you know,
let's get real.
It's like, come on, like it was cute maybe the first time you did it. Second, now it's just kind of like, I don't know, man. Okay, yeah, wow, you picked Vanderbilt to win. You know, ha ha ha. You know, like no one actually thinks Vanderbilt or South Carolina is going to win,
and one of them ends up being the smartest person in the room when they have the season out of nowhere.
I guess
a 2007 type.
I guarantee that the person that picked that, if you had told them to place any money on it, they wouldn't be placing money on it.
Yeah, yeah, very fair.
I think there's a better chance of Vanderbilt not winning an SEC game than there is. I mean,
definitely, yeah,
that's not winning an SEC game than there is of them winning the SEC title. There's a better chance of them not winning an SEC game than there is of them winning 3 SEC games.
Yeah. Yeah. Well spoken. Alabama heads up to the construction site in Nashville this year, so one game to watch.
It will be predominantly Alabama. Like that is like the
it will be a football game.
Yeah.
It will be a football game that takes
last place. Time we went up there, I remember there was a Tua chant because that was the year that he like broke out, or that was the season where he came in for. So I guess it was 2017. Yeah, he came in for Jalen in the final game, but like the whole season there was that tension of people wanting to see him, and he had a really cool play against Vanderbilt. So
there you go.
That was also the Alabama Your Next game. I don't know if you know.
Okay,
that.
I was going to ask. When was that? What year was that?
That was where they started. They started off like maybe 4-0 or 5-0, and then they had that really sassy guy say Alabama Your Next, and like, oh my god, that was rough.
Yeah, I remember that whole viral moment. Well, there you go. We'll see if that happens this year for the Commodores before they play Kalen DeBoer. Something tells me that that won't be the case, but they'll do it for another pod this week. We'll be back. We're less than 40 days away from the season, so a ton of content's going to heat up on Tide Illustrated. So go subscribe there. Subscribe here on the YouTube if you're watching. Follow us on Spotify if you're listening over there. And until next time, take it easy. Subscribe to Tide Illustrated for all the latest. We'll see you next time.